What's up again, everybody? I'm Clayton. Welcome to Ages of Film. Today, I'm going to be ranking all of the films that were nominated for the Best Picture of 2010. So it was the Oscars, the 2011 Oscars, nominating the 10 best films of 2010. So always a little bit confusing when you say best picture of a certain year. Is it that specific year or is it from the year prior? So the Oscars are typically held in March, April-ish, and it's always for the prior year. So this is the 2010 films that were nominated at the Oscars of 2011 for Best Picture. So 10 movies that we're going to rank here, going from worst to best as always. Before I get into my ranking, I just want to first give a disclaimer as always. This is just my opinion. No need to be upset or offended by anything I have to say. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Have you seen all these movies? What is your thoughts? What does your ranking look like of all these films if you have seen them? Anything and everything in the comment section. All I ask that you be respectful. A couple of just kind of stipulations here, kind of what I'm going off of. Obviously, the Academy is biased. They might claim that they're not biased, but they are. The Academy is biased towards certain films, right? So, for instance, superhero movies tend to not fare very well at the Academy during the award ceremony. No superhero movie has ever won a Best Picture award. You know, even if they deserve to win it, even if they were the Best Picture of that year, I'm looking at you, The Dark Knight, which was clearly the best movie of 2008. The Dark Knight wasn't even nominated for Best Picture for that year. So the Academy is very clearly biased towards certain types of films, certain types of topics in film. And just because a movie wins an Oscar for Best Film doesn't necessarily mean that was the best movie of the year. That is simply the film that the Academy recognizes as the best film. But when the Academy has a very clear bias towards certain types of films and certain filmmakers and topics and all that stuff, you kind of have to just take it with a grain of salt. So there's no ultimate right or wrong here when it comes to what is the best picture, what is the best film of a specific year. It is subjective. I get that. So this is just my subjective opinion about who should be the best picture of this specific year based on the films that were nominated. Now, I have seen quite a few movies from 2010. I will say the winner of this list, the number one on this list, I would argue was in fact the best film of 2010. So it's not only the top on this list, but of the movies in 2010, I do think my number one on this list should have been the best picture Oscar winner for the year. Some years, there are certain movies that should be nominated that aren't even nominated. So I can't help that. So I'm just doing, of the movies that received a nomination for Best Picture, ranking those movies and determining of those films which movie comes out on top and which film I would have given the Oscar for Best Picture to of the movies that were nominated. So That's what we're doing here. Gonna go, as always, from worst to best. So I'm going to get into it. And yeah, this should be fun. Another kind of first on the channel. First time I'm doing this. And yeah, here we go. So kicking it off at the bottom, number 10, I'm going with Winter's Bone, starring Jennifer Lawrence. Not a good film, it must be said. I'm not a fan of this movie. I personally do not think this film should have received a nomination for Best Picture of that year. I don't even think it was a good film, let alone one of the 10 best films of that year. I think there were certainly plenty of other contenders that you could have given that 10th nomination spot to above Winter's Bone. I can think of a few right now that I probably would have put in there. I certainly would have put in there before Winter's Bone. So kind of shocking that this movie gets a nomination for Best Picture this year, because for me, this is a 2-star film. I don't think this is a good film. I don't think the directing is all that impressive. I think Jennifer Lawrence is good. The acting is pretty decent, I would say. But the story is not really an interesting story. I don't care at all about any of the characters in this film. I don't think anyone does a good job at making me invest in either the story or the film itself. And it's also just very forgettable. You know, the next day after you watch this movie, you're trying to think, what happened again? What happened in that movie? It's very boring, very slow, very uneventful. And by the time you get to the end, you're just like, okay, I kind of feel like I just wasted 2 hours of my life there, but all right. It is what it is. It received an Oscar nomination that year. Apparently, the Academy thought it was one of the year's 10 best films. There you go. Winter's Bone, number 10 for me. Coming in at number 9, we have Black Swan. Now, I will just say, this is a 3.5-star film for me. So I do really like this movie. There's a significant jump from Winter's Bone at number 10 to Black Swan at number 9. Even though they're right above, right next to each other, just know there's a significant improvement in quality between these two films. So Black Swan, very good movie. Darren Aronofsky directed it, and it stars Natalie Portman in the lead role here. I thought does a really fine job in that role. Gives a very good performance. I think she even took home the Oscar this year for Best Leading Actress, and deservedly so. I thought she was very good. And I do love the cinematography in this movie. I think it's got excellent cinematography, beautiful visuals and framing. And yeah, just an interesting story that has layers to it. It unfolds and it gets kind of darker and darker along the way. More things start getting revealed and you're starting to connect the dots, and it turns out to be a pretty dark film, man. It is a horror film and a very good one. So Black Swan, 3.5 stars. For me, what holds this film back a little bit, I think, for one, the rewatch value. It's kind of a one and done for me. I've seen it. I did enjoy it, but I don't really have any desire to go back to it. You know, it's kind of a film that there's nothing in it substance wise that lures me back to it. You know, there's no characters here that I just gravitate to or am super invested in. They're good characters and performances are good for the most part, but the characters themselves don't grip me. They don't lure me back into the film to want to come back and watch it more. And the story itself, although I think it's scripted well, I think it plays out in a really kind of brilliant way. The substance of the story doesn't really cut it for me. I'm not like super moved in any way by the story. It is a horror film, but I don't know that it fully does its job at being horrifying to me personally. And that's another kind of smaller criteria that I have when factoring in my rating of a movie is, what is the film trying to be? And is it successful at being what it's trying to be? So if it's a horror film, is it successful at being horrifying? Does it actually scare me? Is it something that would be terrifying? What kind of horror effect does it have on me? That is one of my criterias that I have now kind of also factored in to my overall rating system. What is the film trying to be? And does it succeed at that? And for me, I feel like Black Swan is a horror film, but it doesn't fully achieve that for me. I don't find it that horrifying. It definitely has a dark tone to it. You can definitely tell it's a horror film. The subject matter, the tone, the story, it is dark. It is a horror film, but it didn't leave any type of lasting effect on me. I didn't walk away from this being terrified. I didn't have any type of, nightmares about it. I didn't have any type of after effect on me. So I don't know that it fully achieved at being what it was trying to be. And to me, that also kind of deduct some points for me on that. Still a very good film overall. The direction, the acting, the way that the script is written and plays out, very good film. 3.5 stars, number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have The Kids Are All Right. A movie that I did not think I was going to like. Based on reading the synopsis of this film, what the subject matter was, what the kind of the message of this film was trying to say, I did not think I was going to like this movie. I watched it and actually really enjoyed it. And I think the reason that I enjoyed this film was actually because of a Christian worldview that I have. And I think, even though I think the movie is very clear at trying to say a message about the topic of the film, I actually see a completely different conclusion to the movie. The message is clear about what it's trying to say. I think the filmmakers and those involved might think that it concludes that the movie kind of supports that message. But I would actually argue, as you watch this film, that you actually see the opposite effect happen from what they probably think happened. So I think this movie and one's enjoyment of this film can be impacted by what lens you see this movie through. And for me, I think this is a movie, I feel like, that shows the significance of fatherhood. Now, I know this movie would probably argue, and the filmmakers and those involved would probably argue, that a family doesn't need to be a father and a mother. It could be 2 women and kids, 2 men and kids. But its family can be defined by those that you love. And while I do think there's truth to that to a degree, I would actually argue that this film demonstrates the necessity for fatherhood and the necessity of a family being together as father, mother, and kids. So, and I think you can make a very strong argument based on what happens in this film, why a father is needed in this story and in this film. So, yeah, filmmakers might see it through a different lens, and I'm sure they do because it's Hollywood. But for me, as a Christian, in my worldview, I see a completely different conclusion to this film. That the thing is, it actually makes it a good movie, I think, because of that. Because it actually does have something to say. On top of the fact, I do think the performances are good by everybody. Mark Ruffalo is certainly very good. The lead actress, what's her name? The one girl I know, the one lady I know very well. I've seen her in a number of things. The other lady I'm not as familiar with, but they both do a great job as well. I even think the kids do a good job. And typically, I'm not big on kid performances in films, but I do think these kids actually do a pretty good job as well. So, the kids are all right. Is number 8, 3.5-star film. That might get me in some trouble with my take on that one, but hey ho, I never shy away from a little controversy and conflict. So if you don't like it, you don't have to like it. But that's my thoughts on the film. Coming in at number 7, we have Toy Story 3. I've said it many times, I'm not a big animated film person. Animation just isn't really the genre that I gravitate to. It's not really my go-to. I'm very, very, very rarely ever going to just grab an animated film off the shelf to watch. It's just not my genre. Now, that's not to say that I don't enjoy certain animated films. Obviously, I have one 7 out of 10. So I would have it above the movies I've just listed. And this is a 4-star film. So for me, a 4-star film, a 4-star rating, any movie I give a 4-star rating to is a movie that I would consider a great film. And I do consider Toy Story 3 a great film. I saw this in theaters and thoroughly enjoyed it. Toy Story is one of those, animated films I grew up with as a kid. So I was very familiar with these movies. I also kind of talked about Toy Story 3 on my Tom Hanks filmography ranking. I talked about it some there as well. A very good movie for being an animated film. I actually enjoy this movie quite a bit, and I personally think it did offer a successful conclusion to that series. I don't think a 4th film was really needed for the franchise. Now, that being said, the 4th film that we got was still pretty good in my opinion. I don't think a 4th film was needed. I think you could have ended everything with part 3 and had a successful conclusion there. Toy Story 3 is a great film. The story is good. The voice acting by everybody is good. These computer generated stuff all looks really good. It's a great film. So yeah, it's number 7 for me. Coming in at number 6, we have The King's Speech. Now, for all you Oscar gurus out there, you probably know King's Speech won the Oscar for Best Picture this year. So that means obviously it's not going to it's not going to keep its Oscar in Ages of Film. Ages of Film is going to be giving out a new Oscar for Best Picture of 2010. The King's Speech is not going to keep its trophy. I'm sorry, buddy, but you're a great film, but there just happened to be 5 better than it, in my opinion, amongst these 10 movies. Now, like I said, this is a great film, a 4-star film. I thoroughly enjoy it. I think Colin Firth is fantastic. Jeffrey Wright is fantastic. The lady, you guys know how I am with names. The King's wife, she's great in it. It's a great film, absolutely, and I enjoy it. I think it is rewatchable. I have seen this multiple times, and I certainly wouldn't mind watching it again in the future. I think I've seen this 2 or 3 times, actually, and it's enjoyable each time. And I do think it's got some heart to it as well. It's got a good story there. The script is pretty well handled. The directing by Tom Hooper looks really good. And yeah, it is a great film. Was it deserving of the Best Picture Oscar for this year? I don't know. Deserving in the sense that it was very well made, but was it the best picture of 2010? Obviously, I would disagree. It comes in at number 6 for me. A great film. I would certainly recommend it if you haven't seen it. But yeah, so new statue, new Oscar going out. King's Speech gets knocked off. Coming in at number 5, we have The Social Network, directed by David Fincher. Obviously, one of the great directors out there. Another 4-star film. Great movie. I'm not the biggest Jesse Eisenberg fan, but I do think he does a very good job in this movie. Justin Timberlake actually shows that if he is working with the right talent and working with the right director, he can actually put in a respectable enough performance. I don't necessarily think Justin Timberlake is a great actor, but here he's actually halfway decent. So kudos to him and to Fincher for directing him well enough to get a respectable performance out of him. And obviously Andrew Garfield as well is he's fantastic in this movie. The script, I would say this is probably the best written film of these 10 movies. I think I would probably say that Social Network has the best script out of these 10 films, especially in the dialogue. The dialogue here is brilliantly written, very great dialogue writing in this film. Great script writing. It's told kind of in a non-linear fashion, and it's brilliantly handled. It's very well edited. It's a great film. I think what holds it back a little bit for me is I'm personally not really a fan of the exposure in this film. The lighting isn't bad, but the exposure I feel could be better. There's certain scenes, one specifically, the scene with is it Timberlake and Eisenberg or Garfield and Eisenberg? I think it's Garfield and Eisenberg, and they're having this discussion in a hallway, and the exposure in that scene was really bad, in my opinion. Fincher has this kind of history of I can tell by his directing style, he likes darkened lenses and darkened filters on his camera in his cinematography. He likes lower type of exposure in his movies, and while that's not necessarily a bad thing, I think if you're going to have lower exposure with your cinematography, you need to be able, if you want to go that route, your lighting needs to be on point. Your lighting and your framing really need to be on point if you're going to have low exposure, especially in darkened rooms or in darkened settings like that hallway. There's really no lights on in that hallway. So it's already a darkened space, spatially darkened. And then on top of that, you have a very dim light. And then the exposure was very low as well. So it just, you can't really see the expressions of the actors. And that specific scene was a scene where emotion would have elevated that scene and would have elevated the relationship I'm having with those characters. So I don't think this was Fincher's best outing when it comes to cinematography or exposure, specifically with the exposure in this film. The lighting wasn't necessarily bad. There are some spots I felt like the lighting could have been handled better, but definitely the exposure was noticeably, I would argue, not very good. But everything else was pretty on point. But yeah, overall, 4-star film, still a great film. Probably the best script and the best writing of these films, these 10 movies. Great script, good performances, thoroughly enjoyed it, good pacing. Yeah, and it is number 5. Moving on to number 4, we have 127 Hours, a Danny Boyle film starring James Franco. One of Franco's best performances, too, it must be said. Maybe his best performance. I don't know. He does a very good job in this movie. Based on a true story. I love the cinematography in this movie. Beautiful cinematography with excellent exposure. And I actually didn't plan this, but we go from a movie that I don't think had good exposure in it to a movie that had really good exposure in it, in the cinematography. And yeah, great cinematography here, brilliantly lit, brilliantly exposed. The framing is great. The cuts are good, very well edited. And while there's not a lot of layers to the story here, not a lot of, it's not a complex script or complex dialogue, really, not a lot of dialogue. What is there is a strong emotional effect to the film, because you feel for this kid and you feel for this guy, and you see how hard he's fighting to survive and how hard he's fighting to live, that you want him to get through this experience. Part of that is on the performance by James Franco, having a very charming, likable, amiable disposition to him in this film, where it's very easy to attach to him as a character and to like him as a character. A lot of that is on the performance by the actor, and I think Franco does a very good job making me like him as a character. So where this movie may not have, the most complex type of script to it, it makes up for that with the heart and the emotion and the experience of the story is where it makes up for that. And it's done brilliantly. I think Danny Boyle does a great job directing this movie as well. And that third act is, man, it gets me. It gets me in the feels. And in any movie like this, or like a Castaway, for example, where the central performance and the central character is a character that is trying to find a reason, just a reason to keep going, and not throw in the towel and just give up. Those type of movies and that type of narrative resonate with me, and this movie has that kind of element to it in the story. So yeah, I really enjoy this movie. The second act kind of drags a little bit because you're essentially in one spot with Franco for quite a while, and it can kind of be a little bit slow. But I think that's intentional as well, because you're exposed to kind of also experience the exhaustion of the main character played by James Franco. So it kind of, I would say it's intentional, and I think it actually works to the film's benefit. So a great film, thoroughly enjoy it. 4.5 star film. It's right there on the edge. Again, just the thing that keeps it back a little bit, again, is it's going to be kind of it's not necessarily that every movie has to just be brilliantly made or brilliantly crafted, but I don't know that the script itself here is a 5-star tier worthy necessarily. And because there's nothing else to raise it to that 5-star tier, it just kind of falls right at that 4.5 star spot for me. It is rewatchable. It does have heart to it. It does have a good lead character, but there's none of those elements are so high where it lifts this to a 5-star tier. It's right on the edge, 4.5 stars, but which is, I mean, that's a great movie. But yeah, 127 Hours, number 4 for me. Coming in at number 3, we have The Fighter, another great film by O'Connor. First name is David O'Connor or Connell. Yeah, great film. Mark Wahlberg, Christian Bale, Amy Adams. A great film. One of the best boxing movies out there. I wouldn't say it's the best boxing movie. I would have the first Rocky, and probably still Rocky 3 above it. But it's up there. It's up there. It's a great film. Christian Bale turns in one of his best performances. Mark Wahlberg is great. Amy Adams, man, just a scene stealer. She's fantastic in this movie. She's a great actress, and yeah, she's phenomenal in this film as well. Third act, very strong. But yeah, great film. 4.5 stars. Again, just doesn't do enough for me emotionally to get me to that 5-star tier. And you know, that's a tough rating to get. I mean, 5 stars. I haven't really given on my Letterboxd. I really have not given that many 5-star ratings out. I think that should be given to just the best of the best. I don't think it should be easy to get a 5-star rating. So I'm very conservative with my 5-star ratings. You got to be a perfect film subjectively for me to get that coveted 5 stars. This is right there on the edge. 4.5 stars. Great movie. I just needed it to do a bit more for me emotionally to get to that 5-star tier. Other than that, great movie. Number 3 for me. Coming in at number 2, and I'll just say our top 2 here, 1 and 2, very, very, very close. Very close. Honestly, these top 3 or 4 was a very close race, because all of these are 4.5 star tier movies. the top 4 are all 4.5 stars. So they're all right there in that same area, you know, just neck and neck. But especially these top 2, I was going back and forth on who was going to get it. But at the end of the day, made my decision. My number 2 is Inception, directed by Christopher Nolan, stars Leonardo DiCaprio. You got Cillian Murphy, you got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, you got Tom Hardy, Ellen Page, Marion Cotillard, Michael Caine. It's a great film. I mean, Inception is a banger. It's an absolute banger. Saw this one in theaters, loved it. It's a great movie. And this is competing with The Social Network for best written. The script here is very complex. It's very layered. There's so much going on here with Inception. The fact that Nolan was able to craft this film into a screenplay and actually make it work without plot holes, without, you know, things going on. I mean, this shows the significance of sitting on a script, taking as long as you need to make it work. Nolan worked on this film for 10 years. 10 years he worked on the script for this movie. So, and he didn't give up on it. He stuck to it. He took his time with it. He didn't rush anything, and it paid off because this is just an incredible script and screenplay and story idea, coming up with all these this concept, and then taking that idea and that concept and forming into a screenplay and writing it out with the characters and the dialogue and the scene by scene breakdown. Anyone who's ever attempted writing a screenplay, which I have, being in film school, you have to learn how to write screenplays and how to write scripts. And I can tell you, this screenplay and the script is just, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant by Nolan. And yeah, it's a great film. The visual effects are ridiculously good. The cinematography is amazing. The sound is incredible in this movie. The editing is phenomenal. Just a great film. What holds it back? You know where I'm going with it. You know where I'm going with this. If you're familiar with my channel, if you've been watching me for a while, you probably have heard me say I'm not really a fan of Leonardo DiCaprio. Look, we all have them. We all have actors or people or artists we just don't like. Athletes we just don't like. And I have reasons. I don't just like Leo without cause. I have reasons, very strong reasons, why I dislike Leonardo DiCaprio. I won't get into them. This isn't a Leo episode. But yeah, I'm not a fan of Leonardo DiCaprio. And any movie with him as the central character, as the lead in the film, you're going to need an act of God to make me invest in his character at that point, because I'm just not going to like him. I'm just not going to like his character if he's playing it. And because he is the lead in this film, I'm already checked out from his character. I already don't really care for his character. And it's not because of how the character is written. That's the thing. On paper, it's a brilliant character. It's a great character. But behind every character is a performance by the actor. The actor gives the life to the character. And because it's Leo as this character, I'm checked out. I'm checked out. I like all the other characters are great. I'm totally on board with all the other characters in the movie. They're great. But that central character, I can't bring myself to pull for a Leo-led character. On top of that, though, and this is the other thing that gives it the silver medal here, silver place, is I don't feel like this movie has the heart that some of the other Nolan movies have, and doesn't quite have the heart that the first place, the winner on this list has. Would you, if you know the nominees from this year, you can probably deduce you should be able to deduce what that is, because it's the only movie I haven't mentioned. But yeah, it's a very fun movie, it's very entertaining, but it just doesn't quite have that heart to it for me. And I think part of that is because I don't invest with Leo, because it's Leo. If you could literally put almost anybody else in that role and it would work. It would work for me. And I would buy in and I would invest, and it would have that emotion to it. But because it's Leo and I don't like Leo and I don't care about him, that emotional connection doesn't land for me. So Inception is my number 2. It's a great film. I have no issues with anyone who says it's the best, that it should have taken home the Best Picture Oscar. I totally get it. I respect it. It's a great film. Just not number 1 for me. But coming in at number 1, taking home the Ages of Film Oscar for Best Picture of 2010 is True Grit, the Coen brother remake from the original True Grit, starring the legend John Wayne, the Duke, R.I.P. Coen brothers remake it, although I think they call it more of a reimagining. But either way, it's a remake of the original True Grit. Great movie, man. I'm a big Western movie guy. I love a good Western film. I have a number of movies that are 5-star films that are Westerns. So yeah, when Westerns are done right, they're some of my favorite movies of all time. And True Grit, while not quite to that 5-star tier, it's close. It's right there. It's right there. Right there, right on the edge, 4.5-star film. Love this movie. Great Western. I do think it's better than the original, and I love the original. I think the original True Grit is a great film. I love the original. This one is better, though, in my opinion. I think the direction is better by the Coen brothers. The characters work better for me. I think the performances are better. I think the characters are better written, better handled. And yeah, I think the story just kind of comes together better in the remake than it does in the original. So not every remake is better than the original. This is one exception that I do think does top the original. Great film. Here's my issue. Here's my one issue with True Grit that keeps it from being 5 stars. Since I'm talking about it here, I might as well go into detail here as to what keeps this from being 5 stars. The ending. If there's one thing that I think is clearly better in the original True Grit than the remake, is the ending. I liked the ending to the original True Grit. I think that's the better ending. I think that's the ending that the Coen brothers should have used and just reimagined it the same way that they did with the rest of the film. I'm not a fan of the ending to this movie, personally. Starting with the scene where Rooster, he's trying to save Maddie. She's been bitten by the snake. He's trying to get her to the hospital, and he's out in the desert at night, and his horse dies on him, and he literally has to carry Maddie all the way back to the hospital. That's an issue for me. And the reason it's an issue is because Cogburn is an old, out of shape, smoker, drinker, and in the middle of a blazing desert. And he's having to carry this girl for many, many yards and miles to the nearest hospital. And I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. I don't buy that. He's not an Olympian, and this isn't a superhero movie. Like when you come to a superhero movie, you have to buy in at the beginning. You have to know what kind of movie you're coming to, what kind of movie you're in. You don't go to a Superman movie expecting realism, expecting it to be grounded in reality. You acknowledge you're coming to a superhero movie based on comic books, right? So when you see the fantastical happening in a Superman movie, you expect it, you buy it, because that's the type of movie you're coming to. When I'm coming to a Western that's supposed to be set in kind of reality, I'm expecting normal humans to do normal human things. I'm not expecting to see superheroes in a plot and a story that's supposed to be very much reality centered. And I'm sorry, but I just do not buy the fact that Cogburn would be able to pull that off, to pull that feat off. I don't care how much grit you have in you. I don't care how much heart or toughness you have in you. The human body can only go so far, okay? And the human body has its limits. And with him being as kind of fat and out of shape and old and worn down as Cogburn is in this film, he's not pulling that off. I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. And then from there, the final sequence of this movie where Maddie goes back to visit Cogburn, finds out that he's dead. I'm sorry, I'm giving away spoilers here. Sorry. Finds out that he's dead. And to me, there's no payoff there. Like we don't get a satisfying ending. We don't get a payoff to that relationship between Maddie and Cogburn. In the original one, we do. Cogburn comes to actually say goodbye to Maddie. So we get that farewell. We get a satisfying ending to that relationship, and then he rides off into the sunset. Here, we don't get that. Like, Cogburn drops Maddie off at the hospital and then just leaves, and there's no finality there. Like we invest in that relationship for 2 hours and then it never gets paid off. It's just like, I don't like that. It's like waving a candy bar in front of the kid, and then as soon as they go out to reach it, you pull it back and say, no, you can't have it. Some people may be fine with that. For me personally, I would have liked to have gotten an actual payoff to that character relationship between those two characters. I get that in the original True Grit, and it works and it lands, and I enjoy it. Here, I feel incomplete. I feel like it's an incomplete character journey for those two, because we don't get the payoff between those two characters that I feel like the story and those characters needed. So that's kind of my one real issue with True Grit. The remake, everything else is there. I think it definitely has heart to it. I think it's very rewatchable, has great characters to it. Love the characters, great performances. Jeff Bridges as Rooster Cogburn is fantastic. Haley Steinfeld as Maddie's fantastic. Matt Damon as LaBeef is fantastic. Josh Brolin is fantastic. Great movie, beautifully shot. And yeah, I do think that because this one has what Inception lacks, and that is the emotional connection to the central characters, that's why it wins out. That's why it wins out. Characters are the most important thing to me in a film. Because the characters are the one telling the story. And if the characters aren't written well, if they're not handled well, the story isn't going to move me as much. And the characters are played, as I mentioned earlier, by actors. So it's up to the actors to bring to that character what the characters need in order to tell the story in the best possible way. That is why characters matter most. Character and story, but primarily characters, because the characters are the one telling the story. And for me, I feel like True Grit had characters that were brought to life by the performances of the actors, and they told the best story that's had everything going for it the most. Direction, writing, enjoyment, all that stuff comes together the best for me, in my opinion, with True Grit. So True Grit takes home the AOF Best Picture Award for 2010. Just my opinion. Again, there's no right or wrong. Ultimately, it is just opinion. Even the Academy, when the Academy gives out their awards, it's just the Academy's opinion. It's just their opinion. It's not the objective best film. It's just the Academy's opinion. This is just my opinion on the best film for this year. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comment section if you agree with my pick. Do you also think True Grit was the best film of 2010? Is it one of the others? Which one is it? Let me know anything and everything in the comment section. Thank you guys for tuning in. And until next time, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, kick it, and rock on.